Welcome to Legendary Upside Podcast. My name is Pat Carrain. You can find all of my content at legendaryupside.com. That content includes best ball rankings that you can download, upload to Underdog for the big board, and draft right off of them. And the guys who help me update those, and there's been a lot of updates this week, Daniel Raz and Kyle Dvorak are here to discuss a crazy free agent period. Guys, how's it going?
Going well. Life's good. Saquon Barkley is now a Philadelphia Eagle. Packers have a lead back that's not Aaron Jones. So just things we all saw coming.
It's all been very predictable so far.
I know that's it's all been very predictable. Calvin Ridley, I was in our Discord little message, all right, either there's an actual bidding war going on between the Pats or the Jags, or he's doing the Jags a solid and he's waiting to re-sign until the trade compensation changes. 4:00 rolls around and I'm like, all right, let's get the Ridley signing over with. And we got it over with. He got signed and it was all as expected. In no way until the final 30 minutes could we have guessed where he was going to land. The same with Josh Jacobs, in the way that played out, we could not have guessed how that would land. So that makes for a really fun drafting environment though, drastic changes that aren't just Derrick Henry to the Ravens, kind of the chalk that we expected or whatever. Gus Edwards, the freaking Chargers, just the Gus Edwards drafters getting there once again. Those are, I don't think it's fun because they're kind of stupid and expected, but those have been few and far between. It's been a good, an interesting free agency period so far.
It definitely has. Yeah. There's just so much to get to. I think we probably should talk about Barkley first. He's a guy that we were not in on ahead of free agency. Because although he was solid last year, in terms of rush yards over expected, this is a guy who's got a poor success rate throughout his career. He's kind of a boom bust runner, and his yards per route run has been very unimpressive after his rookie season.
I think it's been below 1 over the past 3 years. It just creeped above 1, I think 2 years ago, but all of his routes over the past 3 years combined below 1.
Which is bad. That's anything below one for running back is bad.
Just barely below 1, but point is his reputation as a pass catcher is so much better than his actual production and efficiency as a pass catcher.
Right. So that's and he's also entering his 6th year in the league. He's handled a ton of work. He's dealt with a bunch of injuries. This is the type of running back that we're generally going to be below market on because people are going to see volume and we're going to see a potential decline. It's generally the way this works. But there was always the
if you're new here, folks. This is the general.
This is our whole thing. yeah. So there was always the what if he goes to Houston argument. What if he goes to Dallas? I think would have been, given the way that played out. That would be very interesting. If he had gone to Dallas, I think we just have to get on board, right? The volume is assured, and it's going to be good types of volume. They're going to throw to him. They're going to feed him at the goal line. They were feeding Tony Pollard at the goal line at the end of last year. Pollard has never really been a goal line guy and was doing terrible at it. So it would have been, I feel pretty confident that he would have gotten all that work. But instead he goes to the Eagles, who don't really throw to their running backs. They just had DeAndre Swift there, and he became kind of a early down explosion runner. That I think was kind of illuminating. It's this is sort of what Swift does, and yet that's not really how their offense runs. Barkley is not what Swift has been as a receiver. He just hasn't been. Outside of that rookie season, is that Daniel Jones's fault? Is an offensive scheme thing in New York? Maybe, but I don't think that's changing. And, Hurts doesn't really throw to his running backs either. So already you have major reception issues, and then they didn't outlaw the tush push. It's a thing. And Barkley, again, that's where the success rate comes in. I wrote an article last year. If guys are inconsistent, that sometimes can help us predict goal line work. Now, in Barkley's case, he's not going to lose goal line work to another back, but he isn't the most reliable runner, and you have the most reliable short yardage play in league history. Which one are you more likely to lean on over the course of the season? This isn't hard. So I think he becomes in Philly like an awesome version of Kenneth Walker. But I don't want that in the second round. And I mean, maybe I could take it in the late second, but people are like, oh, early second, no problem. And that's where we're headed in the ADP. I just feel like it's going to be very, very hard not for him to be one of the biggest fades going forward for us.
Yeah, we initially had the fade stance on Barkley, felt good, knew Houston was the likely landing spot that would cause his ADP to justifiably climb. But landing in Philly makes us, I think, feel stronger because, again, I think it's actually Barkley's 7th year because he had the 4-year rookie deal, 5th-year option.
Oh, you're
tag
right.
year. So even better to fade. He's practically an AARP member. But on the Eagles with questions about the receiving workload, and I'm not even sure if it's questions. I think it's almost certain that Jalen Hurts is going to get, if he's healthy, 10 to 15 rushing touchdowns the past 2 years, 13 and 15. So again, it's a successful play. They are not incentivized to move off it for an inconsistent runner. They probably wouldn't move off it for the most consistent running back because that wouldn't be better than the tush push. So Barkley's probably going to be the biggest early round fade for us.
Yeah, it's the classic Ben Gretch's trap back. You're getting loaded up with volume, but not getting a huge percentage of the goal line carries or getting hit with a bunch of receptions. And that's even in half point PPR. I mean, we want receptions, right? I mean, explosive plays also are generated by receptions, not just the catch.
I think even in standard, the average reception is still worth more points than the average carry. I believe that's true.
Well, because receptions are like passing is more efficient than running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It shouldn't be that. I shouldn't even have to question it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a tough. It's actually like the market strongly disagrees, and we have been out of step with the market on Barkley. So, keep that in mind when I say this. But I actually think this was a bad landing spot. Like his ADP should have fallen because the market was. All I heard was, what if he goes to Houston? What if he goes to Houston? I didn't hear anything about Philly. No one was excited about Philly. And now he's in Philly. It's like, oh, wheels up. Like, really? Because he's not going to score any touchdowns and catch any passes. So that doesn't seem like the wheels should be up.
Yeah, we got the Eagles reports pretty recent. It seemed that Tuesday, there were the reports of the Eagles, possibly Penn State coach James Franklin reaching out to the Eagles, which would be a violation of legal tampering. And if the Giants push, they could probably get a comp pick from the Eagles, just like the Cardinals had to give one to the Eagles for John Gannon last year.
Yeah.
So that some Giants folks on Twitter were saying that would be Barkley's biggest impact if we can get like a round 3 pick out of this. But this is, I think, a below median, maybe close to the median, if you want to just say the offense will be so good, especially with Kellen Moore.
Yeah, there certainly is that. The offense is very good.
Yeah, 40th to 60th percentile landing spot. But the market is now treating this like the 90th or 85th percentile landing spot with how his ADP is climbing. So if we knew this was how the market was going to react to Philly, I think we would have been maybe a little bit. I'm not even sure we would have changed our process on this. Philly was an unexpected landing spot, and this is an unexpected reaction. So,
well, maybe it isn't unexpected because people were just not. There's been no traction. I've made the Barkley argument, and outside of like you guys, I don't think I've convinced anyone. So that I think probably was a sign that like there was going to be optimism for him wherever he went, because you don't really bring Barkley in if you don't plan to give him the whole backfield. And so he was going to go somewhere, and it was going to look like he has the whole backfield, and people were going to be psyched about that. He almost had to go to like Carolina or something before people were like, "Oh no." Which wasn't going to happen. So I do feel like maybe I should have read that part of it better, of like, if you want to get Barkley, it's probably better to do it now, because basically wherever he goes, price will probably rise because people are overly excited about this dude. But that's a tough one because it's like, man, I don't really, none of this makes sense. So it's tough for me to recommend. But yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is, if we're going to look silly, I would say we end up looking silly because he's kind of like,
push.
No, they're not. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, if they wanted to ban the tush push, maybe someone else should have like considered getting good at it. if you're trying to ban this thing, like you should be practicing it. Do it well and then get it banned. But it's basically just the Eagles. So I don't think they can or will. It's that Barkley ends up being kind of like Joe Mixon from a few years ago, where he
I was going to say, imagine DeAndre Swift last year. If you can imagine what happened with DeAndre Swift last year, add like 20% more carries, none of which come at the goal line. That's probably what we're in for. And ironically, they're like similar profiles in that the people never lauded DeAndre Swift for his ability to make big plays. It was the opposite. It was that he couldn't make the little plays. And though
and he's more inconsistent, but they're both inconsistent runners.
Yeah, exactly. I think Barkley's probably better, but like at a position in which like when we talk about splitting hairs, we're like,
to be clear, Barkley is better. Swift is not as good as Barkley. We're not haters here. Like Barkley's better.
Barkley's better, but like he's good. He's not great. I don't think.
Yeah, he's good. He's not great.
He's good.
Yeah.
He's not great. And I mean, Swift was also good, not great. A lot of times in Detroit, it just kind of fell off the rails when he got to Philly. I just echo all the points you guys said. This is a running back who we don't think is getting the high value touches. Even last year, the backfield as a whole rated like average to below average in terms of the total expected points delivered to the running back backfield. Even if you say Barkley's getting a lot of them, maybe he's an above average in terms of his share of a average pie. It's just a meh landing spot the market loves. It's we say strange because like we're doing the projections on our spreadsheets like nerds. It is a cool fit. Like it's a good running team with a good offensive line, and Saquon Barkley's a good running back. But in terms of playing the silly little game we play, it's not a plus fit. It's probably like Daniel said, it's right on the median.
Yeah, I think like Joe Mixon a few years ago, he could have several explosion weeks, like true massive weeks, because the offense is so good. And it's like Barkley won't score no touchdowns, and he'll probably score some long touchdowns. So there's probably games where he pairs a long touchdown with usage nearish to the goal. If they're not running the tush push from the 6, so he scores some touchdowns. He could have 3 touchdowns in a game, plus some long runs. Joe Mixon was a big fade for me a few years ago when he was going in the early second round. Mixon's been a fade most of his career for me, but Mixon I think is sort of a similar type of setup where I'm like he doesn't have that great of a path to catches. He's not that great at the goal line. He's I think opportunity wise he's all better bet. Mixon's expected points over the years have been absolutely gallingly high. So getting goal line carries wasn't really the issue, but it's just like this dude isn't that good, but he's on a really good offense. So it's like you're kind of, as someone fading Barkley, I think we are kind of like there's a little bit of like a Russian roulette element to it, where like we're probably correct. Like there's not that many bullets in this chamber, but there's at least one. And it could go off in like week 15 or week 17 and end up being like, man, you had to have Barkley. So ultimately, I think we'll probably, in the big board, I don't know, but as we move into Best Ball Mania, we'll likely become, the process will become a little bit tighter in the ADP as that settles. So that'll naturally happen. But I think we will come towards ADP a little bit on Barkley naturally. We're never going to be ahead of ADP on him, though.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before the show. In the actual sort of spreadsheet where we do the rankings and we're inputting numbers, we have an override button for players, either that we're just like early to news on. We're like, the market's going to catch up to us in 2 days, but like we just have a pretty strong lead on news, or for things that the market is extremely wrong on for some odd reason that they're missing. And we rarely use it. We won't use it on this one. And we're guessing that if we're not using it, and our rankings do reflect some element of this is where ADP is, and we should think not everyone we're drafting against is really dumb. We should respect our opponents to some degree. You'll get some Barkley, and I think that's good. You want to have some of those, like, what if he rips off 3 touchdowns in week 16? But you want to weigh it versus the odds that he even gets you there, or that the good game that is few and far between comes in week 3. We think the odds of those things happening are way higher than his ADP reflects.
Yeah. One last thing on Barkley. What do you think his season-long touchdown line is? And especially compared to Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard, because all three have them up on DraftKings and FanDuel. And if you were to guess which one has the lowest projection, I don't think most people would say Saquon.
Wait, does Pollard beat him? I don't know Pollard's line.
I would probably say Saquon. I mean, it's Saquon or Pollard. It's not Jacobs.
Yeah, Jacobs should have a good one.
So on DraftKings, Jacobs, they're all 7.5 to varying degrees of juice. Pollard has the lowest slightly, but on FanDuel, which generally is a little sharper on these in that they price it more to factor in missed games, Jacobs is 7.5, whereas Pollard and Saquon are both 6.5 at pretty similar juice. So I think if you're asking the fantasy drafter to rank those, they would easily have Saquon ahead of Pollard. If you were to look at rushing yards, I think that Saquon comes in Saquon comes in similar to Pollard once again, and one of them is going to go much earlier than the other. And again, the league winning upside does side with Saquon versus Pollard, but he's projected.
It definitely does. I do. Yeah. But I think let's talk Jacobs, because this is one of the spots that is like, I think, like kind of an incredible landing spot. Like, this is a situation that has, because when I look at, part of it for me with Barkley is that when I look at him, and Daniel's right, he's entering year 7. When I look at him compared to, Josh Jacobs, compared to like Joe Mixon now with the Texans, a lot of these running backs in this general range, I see him as like a better version, or sometimes like a pretty similar bet. Like I view him as a very similar bet to Jacobs. Good offense, stay healthy. If Barkley's a little more explosive, cool, but Jacobs is going to get more goal line carries almost for sure, and has a better path to reception. So these are like similar bets. So far, the market is allowing Jacobs to go well behind Barkley. He's at an ADP of 47.5. This is a little bit misleading though, because he's going, like, if you're in drafts, you're seeing Jacobs sometimes go in like the second or early third rounds. I mean, people are being aggressive, and his ADP was so low before that, it's going to take a while for it to catch up. So it's possible that they're not really that different in terms of where their ADP settles. And it's actually possible as a result that we have a fade stance on Jacobs too, because we only have him in the late third in the rankings right now. Or no, sorry, we have him up to 32 in the rankings. So but I think he could eventually settle more to like the 2-3 turns. So maybe we have a slight fade on Jacobs. But I do think that Jacobs, even at that price, is a lot more palatable to me than Barkley in the early second. And I struggle to see like the difference. Like, is it just like name? Like, why is Jacobs' role? Am I crazy here? Jacobs' role is like much more exciting. The Packers are an exciting team. We just saw Aaron Jones go nuclear. They can support running back production. And they got rid of Jones. Dillon's a free agent. They have no one behind Jacobs. And Josh Jacobs' whole thing is that you just give him the whole backfield, and now he's set up to take a much better backfield than the one he had. And it's like the Raiders situation from 2 years ago, but on a good team. I don't know like how much Jacobs has left in the tank. His rushing efficiency was quite bad last year, but it was very good the year before. But this is the kind of if we're just betting on one volume, give me Jacobs, because I feel better about the type of the volume that it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when most people do projections, Jacobs will come out slightly ahead, with his only current competition being Emmanuel Wilson. The Packers have seemed to indicate they want him to have a shot at the number 2, probably add a rookie to the mix on day 3 like they often do. And the Packers probably have a better win total than the Eagles this year. I think they'll probably be 10.5, maybe 11.5. So these aren't meaningfully different team situations. And given the goal line role that Jacobs is more likely to have, I think he's a better pick in a vacuum. And contract-wise, the Packers gave a very similar per year deal than the Eagles did to Saquon. So it's not like one team with the money indicated differently either.
Well, they also cleared out a talented back who was under contract for only one more year, and he was like 30. But last time we saw Aaron Jones, he was still really good. So I think it's a serious commitment to Jacobs. In Dynasty, I'd be like, so what? It doesn't, like, if he's not good, like, that commitment goes away. But for this year, I think, like, they signaled in a number of different ways, like, they plan to go into this season and Josh Jacobs is like a true bell cow for them, which definitely, catches my attention. Like, I don't want to be sleeping on that. Do I want to pay full price? Do I want to pay, like Josh Jacobs is the 108 now? Like, no, thanks. I'll happily fade that. I think there are red flags in terms of, he's an older, for a running back, he's already an older back, and he's coming off a very inefficient rushing season when he was given a ton of work and couldn't convert it. So there is a point at which I'm getting pretty nervous with the price. But the third round isn't that point, just given how well he's set up.
Yeah, I think they're somewhat similar bets. I pulled up like Rotoviz's expected points for the entire backfield, rushing and receiving. The Packers edged out the Eagles by like a point and a half a game. I do think, though, it probably comes in like a bigger standard deviation, because if I'm guessing, I would say that a lot of the Eagles' expected running back points were just like raw, lots of carries. They got thrown the ball a lot. They won a lot of games until late in the season. And they didn't throw to them. So it was just a lot of between 20 stuff. Still, they got to the red zone a lot. Whereas I'd imagine the Packers are going to get more like, they pass the ball a lot more, but then they get to the goal line and actually use a running back at the goal line more. So like distribution is a little better. The overall points are a little better. And frankly, if you make me guess who has a higher target share and who has a higher backfield carry share, like throwing out the Jalen Hurts rushing attempts, like those probably both lean to Jacobs too. Like Kenneth Gainwell is a better backup than anything currently on the roster, and then your average 4th, 5th round pick than anything the Packers have.
So where do you think Jacobs settles? Because this is kind of the interesting thing where we get to be like pro Jacobs right now, but as I mentioned, I mean, it's possible we actually aren't. It's possible this is a mid-second round pick that we're going to be around behind on.
I think August 31st, we are behind market on Jacobs. I think he comes in within the second round. I'll say like pick 22.
I had 22 as well.
Okay.
So he's probably a priority right now. If you're able to get him where we have ranked, I would definitely I would break ties to Jacobs for sure.
Yep.
Because this is and we'll see. Like as I said, I mean, I'm not really seeing him, even though we have him ranked way ahead of ADP. We have him we do have the override with him where this is where he's at 32 in the ranks. This is where we have him ranked. We're not like ADP's not pulling him down. So, but is this ADP like actually informative? So I don't know. Should we have him slightly higher? I was actually yesterday. I moved him up like 2 spots, but I'm struggling to get him much higher than this.
I mean, in our pure rank, we still have Barkley ahead.
Hang on, without lowering Barkley.
Okay, well, I mean, you could at least close the gap by moving Jacobs up. Is what I was gonna say. Like, obviously, like even within our own pure rank,
fair enough.
Yeah, I'd move Barkley down like 1 to 2 spots and Jacob up 1 to 2 spots. So they're back to back. To me, it doesn't matter in which direction they're back to back.
I'm not going to move Barkley down because it's just
it won't matter too. Also moving because we tethered to the market to some degree. I'd imagine moving Barkley wouldn't make a difference.
All right, we moved Jacobs up a few spots.
Cool.
But I think that in the kind of early third round, he seems fine. That seems like a totally fine pick there.
Yeah.
So we'll just get him there now because it's I think that's kind of where you want to be taking him if you're trying to get some now, which I do think like makes sense. Like get some now. If he's going to end up being an early second round pick, we're not going to have a ton here. So this is a good time. Derrick Henry is another big signing that we got. He goes to the Ravens. Let's see, where did he end up? We were not over. I would say generally we kind of think we were too bearish on this free agent class. Clearly at running back, a lot of them land in good landing spots, and just kind of a miss for us because the meta here pointed in this direction. The running back class is not very good, so teams were incentivized to, if they felt that they wanted to get a running back, they needed to do so in free agency. What I'm surprised by is that teams are sort of as like into it as they were, like, oh, we definitely, this is like a major thing we got to make sure we take care of. We're not going to like try to moneyball this so much. We're going to go out.
Eagles just fielded like one of the worst defenses in the league last year, and it's clearly what caused their downfall. And they're like, 3 years, 30 some odd million for a running back. As a team that we've kind of generally lauded as the analytics team, they flipped the script on us, and they weren't the only team to do so.
Yeah, that part of it surprised me. Where I didn't think like we were going to get the Zeke thing where these guys hang out forever and ever, but I didn't foresee this, but that's a potential leak given just that the running back class isn't very good, and that would obviously get teams kind of more interested in the free agents. So in general, kind of disappointed in that part of the process, and kind of making a note for myself next year. Like, sometimes these free agent running backs actually are pretty good bets, as long as they're cheap enough, which a lot of these guys were. Derrick Henry, though, is probably like the one free agent that we weren't all that low on the whole way. Henry's interesting. He's actually been very efficient as a receiver over the last few years, but you're not going to obviously get a ton of receiving work, but he is flashing efficiency still as like a guy you can throw some screens to. He'll get a little bit of that with the Ravens, not a ton, but I think in general, it's just like he still looks Henry-esque. He doesn't look like the absolute force of nature from 3-4 years ago, but he hasn't kind of fallen off to where it's like, oh, is there anything left here? I do think there's something left here, and he lands in just the perfect situation for his skill set, which I thought was obviously the whole time. This was one of those landing spots that people were discussing. So we're not like way above market, but I think we are slightly ahead of, we're slightly ahead of ADP right now. He comes out in the rankings at 52. We have him, he has an ADP currently of 55. This is another situation where maybe we end up being behind ADP when it's all said and done. But as of now, we're slightly bullish on Henry.
Yeah, I would guess we end up moving Henry up in the ranks at some point, because I think the market will absolutely move Derrick Henry up for good reason.
Just do it now. You're totally right, Daniel. We're going to end up moving him up. We just do it now.
He has a touchdown prop on DraftKings of 10.5. So there are signals. And I think that
he's up since like a week ago. He had an ADP of 61, and he's now up to an ADP of 55. So we're already seeing him rise substantially. So you're right. I mean, I don't think he's settled. I think pretty quickly we'll have a fade stance. So yeah, I think we can afford to get him up a little higher.
I think so too. Like we have him actually kind of a similar style of back, if you can make a similar style back, like right behind Isaiah Pacheco. I think in the when the actual rankings spit out, like I'd be fine with having him over Pacheco. Like he's even
I just made that change.
Yeah.
Even if he's not, like you said, peak Derrick Henry, even current Derrick Henry is like better than Isaiah Pacheco on a team that wants to run the football, and on a team that once they get to the goal line, they don't mess around with this like dumb BS the Chiefs do. And not only do they not mess around with the dumb BS, they have a quarterback who's great at drawing attention, but actually just hands it off a lot. So it's a really good setup for Derrick Henry. He's got a good offensive line, ton of yards before contact. Like I think they're first last year, and over the past 3 years, they're first in yards before contact. Henry is still great after contact. The past 2 years, the Titans line sucks, and they have no one in terms of pass catching talent or, more importantly, quarterback talent to earn the respect of defenses. So this is a great setup. Yeah, I think flipping over, like getting him above Pacheco in the final ranks makes sense. After that, we start to get to players I like, so it's a little tougher to say.
Yeah, with Henry, the one negative that I don't think is really discussed now because it's March, but when Keaton Mitchell comes back, he only suffered a clean ACL tear, so barring a setback, I think given his age, athleticism, there'll probably be reasons that he'll get some work, especially in the receiving game late in the season, which would make it, I mean, Henry would just be a dead zone back, but he's also on an offense where you're fine in probably even the mid to late fourth getting it because Henry will have a lock on goal line touches.
Yeah, if you're throwing stuff at the screen right now, may I remind you how you felt when we said that Dalvin Cook wasn't going to challenge Breece Hall? Okay, this stop throwing stuff at the screen. Okay, Derrick Henry turns 31 in January. It is actually possible that another back takes over work from him at the end of the season. I know it doesn't.
And
feel
he's coming off
possible
of
'cause it's Henry.
He's coming off 2 non-peak Derrick Henry years. Like he hasn't been the
Right.
same back the past 2 years that he was 3 years before that. He's good the past 2 years, but like there is a downward trend. It's just he seems so physically gifted that he can have a very smooth downward trend.
Yeah,
But,
and
like,
he's also like he kind of hit this plateau where it's like
Yeah.
you can kind of see like, okay, he hasn't like just continuously gone down.
mhm.
And I mean, it's like so physically evident what Henry is doing well. Like the numbers
Yeah.
help, but you know, you see him out there like he's still huge. Like he's still extremely hard to tackle. He's moving, he's still huge and moving fast enough that is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas Saquon's max speed, I think, has dropped significantly based on last year. Derrick Henry still maintained near top of the league, or at least near his career best in terms of his max speed. I can
Yeah.
try and pull it up while someone else talks, because Saquon would be the one where there's real concern about, you know, having big play issues that won't exist in Philly. But Henry, based on all history, that won't be an issue.
Yeah, and I mean the Keaton Mitchell thing, like I don't think. Whereas, like with the Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook thing, I was like, the most likely outcome by far is that Breece Hall is the guy at the end of the season, and Cook is, you know, kind of rotating in. I actually think that what happened was not the most likely. I thought Cook would have a little more juice than he did. Henry, I think, like the most likely outcome is that Henry is the workhorse back at the end of the season. But I think we should at least consider the idea that a back who turns 31 January 4th is and you know has handled a lot of work and has fallen off from his absolute peak, you know, maybe isn't crushing it at the end of the season. So Keaton Mitchell was not someone I was very interested in ahead of the draft or ahead of the free agency period, because I just felt like, guys, they're gonna sign somebody. They're gonna, like, Gus Edwards being a free agent and J.K. Dobbins being a free agent was like terrible news for Keaton Mitchell, because it meant something like Henry signing was much more likely. But if Mitchell ends up kind of just fading away, then I think is like a last round pick, he is interesting.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry, courtesy of FF_Ryan B, 4th highest max speed among all running backs last year, even ahead of Keaton Mitchell's max, and he had 5 plays over 20 miles per hour, only behind Breece Hall and Devon Achane. So while he is turning 31, 30-year-old Derrick Henry is also one of the fastest players at the running back position while weighing 240 plus pounds. So he's such an outlier.
He is. Yeah. And I mean, at this point, he's not, I mean, we're talking about like if he ends up in the 4th, I think we'll probably go there. If he ends up in the 3rd, that's where I start to be like, I don't know. I mean, the path to receptions is so thin. He's literally 30. You know, that's probably where I'd start to be like, but in the 4th, 5th, I'm pretty comfortable with it. So we'll probably keep, I don't see him as like a major priority right now, but someone that will probably be like tracking along with the market and not trying to fall too far behind for now. All right. Pollard replaces Henry in Tennessee. This is one where, like, I mean, Pollard was so bad last year that it was very, very tough for me to consider him before we knew where he was going to land. This is a pretty decent landing spot, and that I was worried that he was going to have trouble finding another lead role. He was that bad, and he's a smaller guy. I mean, he's like, you know, a slighter frame. Like it wouldn't have shocked me if he were paired with another running back. But he has been paired with another running back, but that running back, if anything, is kind of the small guy. He's kind of being cast as like the early down guy. So I kind of view this as like a decent landing spot because I thought his range of outcomes wasn't all that great. The market thought his range of outcomes was good, and so I guess they view this as a bad landing spot. His ADP hasn't budged. So we've kind of come to the market here. We're kind of all just staring at each other awkwardly because we have Pollard at 70, 79 in the ranks. He comes out at 78 ADP. So we're dead even with the market. Actually, in the pure rank, we have him at 78 as well. So there's some chaos as guys get shuffled around. The ADP has their say, but we're dead even with the market here on Pollard. I've taken Pollard since he signed with the Titans. It doesn't feel great. And I kind of want to lower him, but I guess what I'd say is as we get through these early rounds, and we'll circle back and talk about Mixon and stuff. But as we get through like the Barkley, the Jacobs, like those guys cost you a lot. And in an environment where as soon as I take a running back, I'm like, oh my God, I'm behind at wide receiver. And wide receivers drying up so fast. We just saw zero running back absolutely crush last year, even with, us getting a big Breece Hall hit in like the third, fourth round. Zero running back was still super powerful. And that was with ADPs like this. I think the getting locked out at wide receiver is not that you can't let that happen to you. So not to say you can't, take a running back or two in the early rounds, but you have to be very careful about how you're deploying your running back capital. And so I think all the more reason to be picky about the bets that we're making early on. When you get to Pollard at pick 78, I mean, we're past the wide receivers are gone. They're straight up gone. I mean, the next wide receivers we like have like ADPs around 100. So this is not a period where we need to be as picky. This is a spot where you take some guys with some warts and, you slot in some running back production to a lineup that should be pretty stacked at wide receiver.
Yeah, he's a fine pick. I do think like there's a pretty reasonable argument to say like he like suffered a high ankle sprain and broke one of the bones in his ankle or lower leg and looked bad immediately after playing after that. There's like a story you can tell yourself that is entirely logical that like he wasn't ready to come back last year. And maybe that Tony Pollard that we know and love is still in there and his numbers got better over the second half of the year. They did not come close to Tony Pollard levels of efficiency, but he went from being one of the least, nearly the least efficient back in the NFL through the first 9 weeks to being okay over the second half of the season. There's like a logical story you can tell yourself that maybe Tony Pollard is still in there. And like, if that guy is still in there and if he's getting a lot of touches on this team, like, I don't want to have none of him. I'm fine. Like, he makes sense at ADP. And like you said, the opportunity cost really drops off at this point.
Yeah. With most of the early running backs, besides Josh Jacobs, who will eventually get to trashing, we've been trashing the others at their ADPs, Sam's Derrick Henry. So the fact that we're just lukewarm on Tony Pollard, think he's a milquetoast selection, probably good if you were to like adjust the leg up rankings running back scale to the market of all the early to mid round running backs. This is a decent one to take. So the market,
because the market doesn't like. I think largely we're looking at running backs on second contracts, several of whom were franchise tagged, some of whom also played out their 5th-year option. And Henry's what, a third contract back? So these are like veterans. And a lot of them are coming off of inefficient rushing seasons. I think maybe all of them that we've talked about so far. I guess Henry, not really, but Barkley was okay. I mean, he
especially though if you're comparing to a career baseline, I think all of them are because like probably should compare to their career, their own career baselines. I think every one of them.
They're not coming off peak seasons, or close to it, So, I think generally that's just going to be a tough spot to be loading up on these guys. But yeah, let's talk Mixon. Mixon is at an ADP of 83. We have him at 78 in the ranks. We actually have him at 64 in the pure rank. We haven't overrode that. Partly because I'm like, how much is the market going to come to that? Because I don't know. Are we like Mixon mega bulls here? His rise has not been substantial. He's at pick 86, and he started at pick 89 just a week ago. So the market has actually not been all that enthusiastic about Mixon. I think part of the ranking here for me is that I thought that they would be. So I'm like, if you're not going to make me take Mixon, I don't view him as a priority. Like if I can take Mixon, more like pick 74, which is where I'm about to put it, then I'm happy to do that. But I don't know. I guess I'm surprised. Like all I heard with the Barkley thing was the Texans. Well, this is the dude on the Texans. And Mixon has not, like, his efficiency has been, I mean, it's Mixon, so like he constantly gets stuffed at the goal line. Like I played him that week in DFS too. Like he's burned me. Like this dude, I've faded this guy, and yet I have like Mixon scars all over my body because I also have like gone to him in DFS.
So he's been around long enough that you've been hurt by him, even if every single week you were lower on him in DFS, and every single year in best ball and redraft you were lower. He fell at some point. You drafted him. You're like, I should have let him fall farther.
God damn it. Yeah, so we've all been hurt by Joe Mixon. Like he's not. No one's a fan. But I don't know. I'm like a little surprised that there isn't. Sometimes I enjoy. I'm out here tweeting about how I'm sneakily drafting Michael Thomas. I do get like a sick pleasure out of drafting the guys. So I'm like, I think this guy's gross, but like this is too cheap for this gross guy. And I like drafting the archetype where I'm normally like, why are we drafting this dude? So high. Mixon used to go in the second round. It used to make me like crazy. Like, what are we doing? Now, if I'm able to get him, in the 70s, that seems pretty good. Like I'm taking on risk, but like it's not a great running back class. Like how much more risk is there? A risk he's a committee back? Yeah. That maybe his most likely scenario, but he doesn't look done in terms of his efficiency. He looks solid still. He's in a great situation. They haven't added anybody yet. Dameon Pierce is no threat. Like he could be a very strong pick if you're getting him, outside the 6th round, which you can right now.
Yeah, I would assume the market comes out more. It's like holding a mirror up. You love these guys, like the relatively inefficient, older second, or in this case, third contract back on a good offense. Like this is a 4th round pick for you guys.
Think about the projectable volume, folks. The volume, you can project it.
Yeah, like Chris Carson when he was an early 4th round pick. Zeke Elliott, he was an early 4th round pick.
Almost.
Yeah, but Zeke early 4th to Pollard in the 8th. Like, the market should love this guy. So I don't want to love the bad archetype, but when the bad archetype is properly priced, we're at least not hating on it. Again, this is an offense we want to be in on. People were drafting Saquon with probably a large chunk of percent next team Houston wanting to be in on that. So I'm not sure what we're missing. Maybe there's a chance they add it back, but I think that's not priced incorrectly, because even if they add a guy round 3, round 4, Mixon's still live to be in a committee on a good offense. And in the 7th round, that feels like a worthwhile target.
Yeah, I mean, I just talked to JJ Zachariason yesterday about the running back class and like kind of tempered my enthusiasm even for guys like Trey Benson, where it's like Benson could be interesting, but there's like a lot of Ty Chandler's types, not Benson maybe, but he's probably better than that. But there's a lot of like Ty Chandler types in this class where like maybe we hear from them, but it might not be this year. And I'd also note that Mixon is playing on the final year of his deal. So he comes with a $6 million cap hit. They traded a 7th for him. So he didn't get cut and then like re-signed to the veteran minimum. They gave up a pretty meaningless asset, but
Mm-hmm.
they could have gotten the next Brock Purdy. They gave up that chance.
And the money's not nothing at a, if the NFL clearly thinks running back is a low value position, like they could have moneyballed to draft a 4th rounder and like literally go for like Zach Moss, but instead they like gave him a little bit of draft capital, a little bit of money. And we know they don't like Dameon Pierce given how they used him last year. And we don't have any reason to believe that like, oh, maybe this Dameon Pierce guy could be a thing. He was dreadful last year. So there's like a really strong argument for projectable volume that it's hard to see how it goes away. And normally, even in that scenario, when we say like this volume projects quite well, like even then we typically say like, but it's too expensive. We know it's so hard to predict these things, but the market isn't charging us for this specific projectable volume. So it's probably okay to be like, yeah, it looks pretty ironclad.
Yeah. The one pushback I would give to that was on the money. They gave him 0.75 DeAndre Swifts. This is like low end based on
we can't
this.
come DeAndre Swift. That was insane.
It's the new Timothy Mozgov contract. So, you know, with the cap increase so much, we saw so many teams giving larger than expected contracts. You know, Daniel Salib, who does a tremendous job projecting contracts. I think all his projections factored in the 255 cap number. Running back, along with offensive guard, were some of the ones that were most off. So I think that part of the money you do have to adjust. Like one DeAndre Swift in the 2024 cap economy is not what last year $8 million would have been. It's a significant change, but $6 million, not nothing, but also less than 0.8 DeAndre Swifts.
Yeah, no, that's true. And his team moved on from him for Zach Moss, which we'll get to. And he was initially reported as cut, and the Texans are like, we'll basically just get him at this price tag, so we don't have, maybe partly so like we don't have to pay him like DeAndre. So like this actually, we're kind of into this. But I do think it's important because it's like he's not set up like he's just been brought in on a cheap deal, and it's like he's like, I don't see him as like all that much more vulnerable than a Pollard, or even than a Swift. Like he's
Yeah.
got to be good, or he's going to lose work to someone, or or he at least he can't be straight up bad, or he will lose work. He's not overly protected. There's not a big investment here, but that's the same for a number of these backs. So, it's not the same as like the Jacob situation. Like that's a commitment. They just committed to this.
Yeah.
They're going to ride out some inefficiency this year if he's not good. But like if Derrick Henry isn't doing well at the end of the season, as we mentioned, like this is a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Like they'll make other plans if it's a problem. So I kind of view it more like that. Like Joe Mixon has the chance. He's going to get the first crack at it if he can be solid. The way it shapes up right now, like this should be his backfield. And I don't know, I guess I'm surprised that, like Aaron Jones hasn't fallen behind Mixon. Aaron Jones hasn't really fallen much at all. He's fallen half a pick in ADP over the last week. I know he's now on the Vikings, but like, you remember that they have Sam Darnold instead of Kirk Cousins, right, Market? Like that's like Sam Darnold's, more talented, but kind of probably going to be rotating off a little bit more often than Mixon, right? Like not a workhorse type of guy, never has been. That running back with Sam Darnold, I think is at least slightly like maybe a pick less appealing than Joe Mixon on the Texans.
Yeah, and we say Sam Darnold, also a very good chance they take a rookie quarterback from Michigan. So again, that's also not
which
that
doesn't
good.
really move the needle for me. I think it raises the floor of like, this isn't going to be a disaster, but it's not going to be nothing. They can't be the Texans. They can't even be what they were last year with Kirk.
I'd probably push back. I think the Darnold 25th percentile is better than the McCarthy 25th.
Well, I just mean it gives him 2 outs. Like getting McCarthy in is good.
Yeah. But with Aaron Jones, a large part of why we're in after Brian Gutekunst said we're with Aaron for next year was we were pigeonholing him correctly to be the Packers lead back, an offense we really want to be in on. And then him going to the Vikings, we still think highly of the player, but we also know how fragile volume projections are. And on an offense that's slated to have Sam Darnold or what's probably the 4th quarterback in the draft, that feels like a pretty dead zone-y back, even if they're decently talented.
Yeah, so we have him down at 74. And so because of the ADP, he comes out ahead of Mixon in the ranks, which I think is fine. I'm just a little surprised by the way the market's reacted. So I guess I don't like that's not crazy to me. Like you want Aaron Jones because Aaron Jones was still very good last year. He's a good receiver. He's better than Joe Mixon, I think, but he's older and he's on a worse offense. So it's like an interesting, comparison point, and the market's like pretty definitively on the Jones side here, which affects the rank so that he actually is coming out ahead. But that one, I don't know. I guess it's like the Vikings in general, we've been bearish on this whole way. We've been really bearish on TJ Hawkinson. We've had him overridden in the ranks with a mega fade stance this whole time. Just the injury timeline looking very, very concerning. Serious questions about who their quarterback was going to be the entire offseason. The market's starting to come to us a little bit, I think, there. Jordan Addison we haven't been bullish on because of the quarterback uncertainty. We've actually flipped Jamar Chase ahead of Justin Jefferson, and I think that ultimately ends up happening in the that happened. Okay, so Justin Jefferson now is behind Jamar Chase, but we got ahead of that. That was pretty obvious that was going to happen once they lost Kirk. I pushed to do that originally, but wisely you guys were like, if we don't want to have like no Justin Jefferson, and then they signed Kirk, and so anyway, we've been like kind of factoring this in maybe more than the market the whole way. So maybe not that surprising that we then are factoring it in more than everyone else for the Aaron Jones stuff. But let's see what else. What other running backs signed? Oh, DeAndre Swift. We need to discuss. Man, I've taken Swift. Okay, and I took Swift with DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, Caleb Williams. I maybe even tacked on Cole Kmet there. This was like a sweet stacked team. Made sense. A lot of people built. And afterwards, it's like, wish I just hadn't taken Swift. It just doesn't feel good. Probably good that I did, but though having said that, we're not like behind ADP really. He comes out 94 in the ranks, and the ADP is 95. So, we're even. What are your guys' thoughts on him?
Yeah, is he a worse pick than Miles Sanders last year? If you were like think about not include cost, just in terms of the profile, is he meaningfully different than late 5th, early 6th round Miles Sanders, who we thought was a bad pick there?
Probably not. But he was one of the worst picks in the entire player pool.
I think he is worse. I think the surrounding players are more likely to take a meaningful chunk of work off of Swift's table than Chuba Hubbard was. Chuba Hubbard was still a good bet to take work. We really like Chuba, but I do think that the combination of Herbert Roschon is more likely to be a meaningful thorn in the side of DeAndre Swift, even from week 1, than Chuba was to Miles Sanders. And Chuba, the whole play was like, they're going to figure out Miles Sanders isn't that good, and down the long run, he won't be a workhorse. He'll be a workhorse in the first 4 or 5 weeks. It won't go great. They'll start scaling his roles back. That's what the projectable volume fallacy is. It's not that week 1 the guy fails. It's that at some point it happens. I don't even know if we'll get week 1 Miles Sanders role for DeAndre Swift week 1. I'd be surprised if we did, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that last year on one of our, digesting midseason pods, Kyle made a good point of the market has never properly priced in those dead zone backs. So why should we think they'll ever do it? We can sort of just let the market show us, okay, we finally have the dead zone back priced properly, instead of us at leg up thinking, okay, now we can assume they're priced properly. We can just let the market be wrong until it's right rather than try and time it.
But I think there's something like, so the reason that the dead zone running backs in best ball, I think, are still something you really want to avoid for the most part, or want to be very intentional about who you're taking. I mean, we were into Travis Etienne last year, obviously Breece Hall. Gibbs, we weren't like super bullish on Gibbs, but we were early to Gibbs, and then when he got his most expensive, maybe not so much, but we were generally in on Gibbs as well. There were guys that we liked a lot in a range you would call the classic dead zone. The thing is that, as I mentioned before, when you take running backs there, it puts you behind at wide receiver, and the wide receivers, I mean, really dry up. We're actually working on a tool to help visualize this. But you can just see here, like, just, you know, as I scroll through, and I've shared the rankings now, you can see the orange here, or the yellow for the wide receivers really starts to dry up. And, you know, early on, it's kind of all you're seeing. That, I think, is generally like what it feels like to be in these drafts, where there's a lot of wide receivers, but you got to make sure you're getting them, and then they're gone, and it's just like you're just seeing all green, purple, and blue, and it's like, all right, time to get my running backs. If a running back's available at that point, then I'm gonna be less picky, because it's just like I kind of have to take running backs if I don't need tight end or quarterback. So yeah, it's like Swift is in that mix. In fact, he's well past that mix. So I think that there's two questions. One is like, should I be taking this running back because the opportunity cost is so high, right? The other question is like, should I be taking this running back at all? Miles Sanders last year, I mean, there was a point at which he would have been a good bet, even though he didn't pay off. But, you know, Swift is flashing a number of red flags. He wasn't very good last year, really, on the Eagles. Like, he wasn't super efficient. And, you know, now he goes to a team that's going to be worse. He also goes to a team that has players who can kind of do what he does. Like, Herbert can run in the way that we like when Swift's at his best. He can't really catch passes, but Roschon can pass protect pretty well. And so you've got actually two guys that could kind of eat into his workload from two different sides. So of all the guys we talked about, if there's a candidate for like straight up not playing at the end of the year, DeAndre Swift would, I think, be the clear best bet for that. So, I mean, are we too high then? Like, but this is much cheaper than Miles Sanders was last year. Like, if Miles Sanders was picked 95, I don't think I would have been upset about that. I think I would have probably taken him a fair amount.
Yeah, we would have been close to the field, I would guess, on near 100 pick Sanders. Maybe we should be a tiny bit behind ADP on Swift, because there's a range with so many running backs, and I think many of whom are more attractive picks than Swift. But I at least can squint and see the appeal to Swift. And again, the opportunity cost isn't too high. It's predominantly other running backs.
Here's the thing I think that seems insane, but I'm starting to really believe this. I think all the Bears ADPs go up when they draft Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense at all.
Obviously, he's minus 1,200. It's a foregone conclusion, and I still agree with you, because we see this type of thing happen every summer like clockwork.
So I don't think we should move Swift down yet.
That's fine. Yeah.
I think he. Let's get some Swift. Let's build some Bears stacks at cheap prices for, I don't know why, but for some reason you're going to be able to make cheap Bears stacks now before Caleb's actually there. When he's there, the market's going to be like, holy shit, Caleb Williams is going to be a huge upgrade for this offense.
Guys, you are going to believe this.
All right. Who else do we need to talk through?
The Bengals.
The Bengals, and we need to talk through the Commanders as well. Let's talk through the Bengals first. Zach Moss, big riser, really, really big riser, but still, I mean, we're way ahead of ADP, but his ADP is still at 142. That's not accurate. Let me pull up the rising. Moss is up 22 picks since last week. He's the third biggest riser behind Jonnu Smith and Gus Edwards. Jonnu Smith, obviously, he rose from basically not being drafted to pick 197. Edwards from 188 to 166. We'll get to him. And Moss from 164 to 143. I think generally I've been able to get Moss, but you kind of want to start thinking about him in like the 115 range, I would say. So yeah, we've got him. Well, I guess we have him at 112. So yeah, you think about him where we have him ranked. See how nice that is. But yeah, what are your thoughts on kind of where he settles versus where Chase Brown settles, where they should settle?
I think both should probably be within the top 100 when you look at the unambiguous backfields where there's clear upside. If one player is able to consolidate the touches, you can sort of live with the medians being fine, acceptable, knowing that both of them have the chance to realize a meaningful tail outcome, though only one of them probably will. And even if they're splitting, I think there are ways for both to pay off. So I find it hard to believe I'll be underweight the Bengals backs.
And this is, if we're talking about like Swift and where we would have taken Miles Sanders last year, this is the range where I think it's perfectly fine to just like be really overweight both backs. Like, if we're going to get them both right before pick 100, we're not taking them on the same teams. Although, if you let me have them around pick, like, like let's say I was on the turn or something, I got going more like pick 120 and I just grab both. Like, I'd probably do that.
Yeah.
But generally you're taking them on different teams. I think that being overweight both these guys and betting on it kind of like a Bills backfield from 2021, where it's like Zach Moss, Devin Singletary. We weren't sure which guy was the right pick, but the answer was just like, don't try to get it right and grab both these guys a bunch. And the hit is going to be big enough, most likely. I mean, there's some scenarios where they're both kind of meh, but there's probably a hit here. And this is fertile ground. So I think just getting both guys around pick 100 is pretty good. And so we're actually above market now on Chase Brown as well. His ADP is 106. We've got him at 98 in the ranks. And Brown, let's see, has risen by 3 picks over the last week. So Mixon's departure being replaced with Moss has had an impact, but not like a huge impact on Chase Brown. And so I'm guessing that this is going to be a spot where we're pretty bullish, where we're suggesting get a Bengals back in most of your drafts, which I like. I mean, we had to draft Joe Mixon like in the second round for all those years. We were getting him in like the 4th last year. Now, like, yeah, we're gonna take some losses. Maybe half the time we're gonna be eating it on one of these backs. Maybe they kind of both have some nice weeks and there's a clear winner, but the other one's not a disaster. This is a nice price for the upside, I think.
Yeah, I think they're both cheap enough to where like it's actually pretty conceivable they're both winners. I think if they're both winners, maybe it's small winners, but like at the current prices, I actually think it's pretty conceivable. Maybe not the most likely outcome. You can easily envision a world in which they both hit at these really modest prices. It's like very Eagles backfield last year where we like know they're a good offense. We know they give a lot of work to their running backs, and we know that they're not that expensive. We just want to be taking shots because if we find a winner, there's a chance the winner is a really big winner. In the Eagles backfield last year, we had to labor through like a month or two of like, oh, Rashad Penny was really good, but they have no investment in him. And then we eventually learned like, oh, they have no investment in him and they clearly don't even, maybe they'll cut him. We've already kind of passed that stage. There's not a third guy here. Like, and we ended up getting, I think, 1,200 yards from scrimmage and a handful of touchdowns from DeAndre Swift as like a modest win. And he was the expensive one. Like I think he's more expensive than anyone on our Bengals backfield is.
Yeah, no, he was. No, he was, I think, settled in like the 8th.
Yeah, I was going to say he had to have been. So, like,
yeah,
I think it's a very similar situation, but also imagine goal line work. These guys are what if goal line work instead of the quarterback taking it all. This, like,
what if goal line work?
What if goal line work, buddy? Imagine, that thick white line right for the end zone. We're getting our running backs there this time. So, this to me seems like ADPs will rise. I bet a lot. Obviously, ADPs will come up significantly. But I actually don't even know if this is one that at the end of the summer we'll be saying, like, hope you got him early. Like, I could see us being consistently ahead for most, if not all, of the summer.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is that Moss is going to come up and flip Brown.
Probably.
And then we're going to have, maybe we'll be a little bit bullish on Brown. Maybe Brown falls a little bit, which we would kind of fall back with the ADP to some extent. But that's fine with me. I don't really care. I want to take both these guys, and if the market's gonna say that Zach Moss is the guy we should take first, like, okay, cool. I would say I think there's already kind of there's a little bit of a drumbeat for you fool. It's obviously Moss. I've seen some of that. And I guess what I would say is like, how much Zach Moss did you draft last year? Because we had this whole contract situation with Jonathan Taylor. Like we knew he was going to miss, he's on the pup. So he's going to miss the first 3-4 games. Like someone was going to run there. And so you knew Zach Moss was on the Colts, right? So obviously with Zach Moss, who's awesome, you would have drafted him, right? You drafted him a bunch. Like this guy sucked a year ago. We all thought he sucked. And now he's awesome. Like, so it's fragile. It's fragile. He had some good games. I'm not saying he didn't. I think he's good now too. I'm not saying I think Zach Moss secretly sucked. I think he's good. He looked good. But like our opinions as a collective here change fairly drastically, especially with the non-elite players in this game. Is it possible that we're all like, remember that collective Zach Moss delusion we had where we decided he was good for like 13 months and then we were like, oh, wait, he's Zach Moss? Like that seems pretty likely to me. And so, getting some Chase Brown in your portfolio is at this price, I think makes a ton of sense. Now, on the other hand, Zach Moss is just really good. He runs really well out of the shotgun. They're going to run a lot of the shotgun there. Chase Brown was a day 3 rookie who had some nice long runs, but then they invested in another back. They're not giving him the backfield. He could basically be a 0, and Zach Moss could be an absolute league winner. Like, I think both are plausible. So, like, let me just get both guys in my portfolio.
Yeah, I look forward to our mid-year review next year when we're talking about how Travion Williams was the league winner. But yeah, I think
no, it can't be Travion.
we
can't handle that.
I don't know. He rushed for like 1,400 yards at Texas A&M 9 years ago.
Yeah, I'd like for the NFL draft to go by without them adding a meaningful addition to the backfield before you can say, it's a 2-man race. But both guys are such strong picks, even factoring in a chance of a probably day 3 rookie. So I'd be willing to just be overweight both. The Eagles last year, the Bears last year, the Dolphins last year. These ambiguous backfields generally produce outsized wins. So it's
right. By the way, I think it was Reeves who was in on Moss last year. So there were some people.
Yeah, there were people. It wasn't non-existent. It was 1,760 yards for Travion Williams, for those wondering.
What year?
His 3rd year in 2018 at A&M. I was right about that.
Brian Robinson and Austin Ekeler are joining forces in Washington. Robinson's down 4 picks over the last week. Ekeler is down 1 pick. So this is seen as a bad situation for both to an extent, although no one's panicking clearly. What are your guys' thoughts on this one? I mean, Robinson, I've liked more than you guys the whole way. But this is definitely bad for his receiving workload for sure. But we're talking like a Cliff Kingsbury offense. They're going to be running, they're going to run a lot. They're probably going to run fairly efficiently. And Ekeler, when we talk about guy he's flashing like he's done. We're getting all the serious red flags with the efficiency here with Ekeler. So, I think he can be like a good receiver out of the backfield and kind of be like, more like a committee back. But I think Robinson's probably pretty safe to have the early down work. So I don't know. We're behind ADP right now, but that's because I think he'll probably continue to fall a little bit. But in this same range, I think Robinson's like a totally fine pick. Where are you guys at?
Yeah,
I like where we have him. We're 4 spots behind his ADP, which is like, yeah, he's a 2-down guy. I don't think there's like really league winning upside with him where like I can actually kind of squint and see it with someone like Chase Brown who's got like maybe just a wider distribution. But Brian Robinson, like you said, it's fine in that the worst case scenario for Brian Robinson was they draft a day 2 running back who like that guy could just be straight up better than Brian Robinson. Robinson's good, but like he's from the previous regime. If they commit to a new running back with a lot of draft capital, I'd be pretty worried. They committed some money to a clearly in decline, which is putting it very nicely, running back, whose best role is taking pass catching work, which Robinson was fine as a pass catcher last year, but he's never really been used like that. So it doesn't surprise me. This is kind of par for the course for what we expected and still leaves a lot of meat on the bone for his between the tackles work on an offense that should improve this year. So it's fine. I think having him like a few spots behind ADP and probably getting even with ADP at some point, I'd imagine. So
I think we will because he's falling. So
yep,
I think it'll just continue to fall.
Us. I think a few more spots. So I think we're like perfect. And if we ended up ahead of ADP, wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, the Commanders had a ton of cap space in free agency, and I think they've approached it pretty well. They've taken a lot of 30-plus-year-olds, which might not be the best, but they're not handing out these huge market-setting deals. They gave Austin Eckler 2 years, $8.3 million, which plus some incentives, but on a per-year basis, that's 0.519 DeAndre Swifts and 1.04 Zach Mosses. So this isn't big money to Austin Eckler. It would not shock me if he's basically a zero at the end of the year. And more importantly, he shouldn't really intrude on the stuff Robinson does best.
Yeah, we've had, the last 2 years we've had a back go in the kind of the early double-digit round range who has been a literal zero. I don't think Eckler does enough as a receiver that he's probably not, like, that seems unlikely that he would be, the Rashad Penny of this year, but it's concerning. Like, the NFL just wasn't that interested, and we're seeing, like, if I was advising the NFL, I don't think I'd have, I don't think they're off base in a huge way here based on the rushing efficiency declining. But he's going to be out there as a receiver. They probably are going with Jaden Daniels, it seems like, a quarterback. So maybe there's not that much receiving work to be had. So I don't know. Eckler, we're behind ADP, and he is falling. I don't know. I wonder if we should even be lower, but
yeah,
where you guys at?
I would. I think that the moment the NFL draft happens, again, I think it's 60-40, maybe 65-35, Daniels versus May at 2. If Jaden Daniels goes 2, day after the first night of the draft, the market and all these drafters are coming being like, oh, I think I got to adjust Austin Eckler now that they added Jaden Daniels. So once we get that situation, we'll readjust. But I think I'm more confident the market is not factoring in the likely Jaden Daniels, and Drake May would be probably a little better, but I don't even.
I think he'd definitely be better.
I think he'd be meaningfully better, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. He scrambles, but like, he's just not gonna. Daniels is gonna run a lot.
Yeah.
So, no, we actually do have Eckler in the pure rank quite a bit lower, down at 109. So this is the. Maybe I don't know. The thing is, like, we could override that, but I don't think he falls as far as this. I don't know. I guess we can discuss. All right, let's talk the Titans. We were pretty in on DeAndre Hopkins, like very in, I would say, actually, on DeAndre Hopkins. He just set up. I think it's set up pretty well for him. Is like, this is a guy. We want to talk about it like our guys falling off. Like, Hopkins does not look like he's falling off. He's an older guy, but he still was like a true number one target earner last year, and wasn't getting priced like that at all because he's got Will Levis throwing to him. But pretty interesting upgrade in terms of the offensive system. I think they're going to throw a lot more. There should be more volume. But now that volume is going to be split with Calvin Ridley to an extent. What are you guys' thoughts on Hopkins now, who we're still ahead of ADP on post-signing?
I honestly would not be that concerned about the volume split with DeAndre Hopkins. I think Hopkins is just a meaningfully better target earner than Calvin Ridley at their respective points in their career. Like, I think mostly what Calvin Ridley is going to come in and do is make sure that I never have to blurb another Nick Westbrook-Akine blurb because he got 6 targets and scored once or whatever, like Chris Moore or whatever. These guys, and like, improving on them will also add targets to the pool via him being good. Like, you can create more volume by being good and earning it. So, like, I just think DeAndre Hopkins is meaningfully better in that. Not that Calvin Ridley can't get there, but I'm not really sure he proved he can last year. And DeAndre Hopkins is a much higher bar of competition for targets than Christian Kirk, who's good, but I think Hopkins still looks like a true like alpha one. I don't think Ridley threatens him a ton for that. So this is like fine with me for DeAndre Hopkins.
What about with Ridley? Because the market is we've been behind the market on Ridley the whole way. He hasn't fallen at all. His ADP is 57. It was a 57 a week ago. That strikes me as bizarre. Like the idea of Calvin Ridley in Jacksonville equals Calvin Ridley in Tennessee is just wrong. Like Hopkins is better than Kirk, I think. Maybe I guess you could argue that, but
I wouldn't argue. I don't think you're going to find anyone on this show who argues it. So
okay. So if Hopkins is better than Kirk and Lawrence is better than Levis,
Lawrence is meaningfully better than Levis, and Lawrence
Denny Carter's not here, so I think there's no one's going to push back on.
I think he also doesn't like Levis, so even he would be on board.
So even he wouldn't push back on that.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know for sure, but like Lawrence coming off of a meh year is still, I think, meaningfully better than Levis. And of course, you can say like, oh, well, Levis could take the next step next year, but like second round rookie who didn't look good his first year, like my guess is the median outcome for that guy is not good his second year. It's just like the harsh reality of like guys who don't get a ton of draft capital at the NFL at the quarterback position, not getting first round draft capital, I think matters a lot. So I'm going to say he didn't get a ton of draft capital and then don't look good. Like my hopes for him aren't high in his second year. And I feel like this is a Saquon situation where like sometimes you take a stance all summer, and I think we're just going to take a stance all summer.
Yeah, I don't think that comping it to the Steelers is wrong. Kenny Pickett went at 20 or 21, but year 2 Pickett, year 2 Levis, similar enough draft capital when you look at how many quarterbacks are on the top 5 and 10, that then 20 to 33 isn't too big a difference. And then with Pickens, Deontay versus Hopkins and Ridley, granted, Ridley's ADP hasn't reacted much because he signed. So we're filming this Thursday. He signed last night, tweeted chestnut.
Yeah, you're right. That's unfair to the market. Maybe we just haven't seen the fall yet.
Yeah, I think it will fall. It has to fall because Jaguars, and if the pie was like 50% Patriots, 50% Jaguars, and now it's 100% Titans, that's a worse pie. That's a meaningfully worse. So I think he'll probably settle in the late 6th.
I think I'm just completely out in the late 6th, though. Like, what's the difference between Ridley and Courtland Sutton?
I'd like to know the Denver Broncos quarterback.
Yeah, sure. But, like, it's not going to be that much worse than Levis.
They might be in the same zip code. Maybe, I will say to Will Levis's credit, with how the Broncos are set up right now, I don't know if they have what if he's good scenario where like, sure, Will Levis could be good. Like the NFL at least gave him second round draft capital. Some scouts liked him. They don't have a path to even that, but like,
well, they do. His name's Justin Fields. It doesn't seem particularly likely because I don't think Peyton wants to tie himself to Fields, but
yeah, exactly. Like
that is, they do have that path if they want it.
They do. I don't know if they take it, but as of right now, it's still on the table. And maybe like, I mean, actually, really, they could just take I don't know if I think they have their second round pick, but they could just take a Penix or a Bo Nix, and we'll be in the same boat we are with Will Levis. We're like, non-first round quarterback who is a pretty mixed bag coming in, except we already kind of got a Will Levis isn't great sort of hand tip last year. So yeah, it's that Courtland Sutton is better. That's the difference, is I think Courtland Sutton is maybe a little better. It's not the biggest deal, but I think he's better.
And he doesn't have target competition in a real
way less.
Yeah. So that's where I'm like, I mean, I guess you could say like, if I were going to push back on us, I'd say you guys are too confident that Hopkins is better than Ridley. If you're this out on Levis, then you shouldn't be above market on Hopkins. Because if Ridley ends up, let's say, not even being like better, but let's just say he fits the new scheme better.
Sure.
Now you guys are eating it because, it's not necessarily that like Ridley's crushing you, but Hopkins is a bad pick, and it's a bad pick on an offense that you weren't even all that excited about. So how did this happen?
Yeah, I think that's a good response, and maybe we should, if our macro view is anti-Titans, we either should be more towards the median in the macro view of the Titans or stop being so confident in Hopkins. I think one of those has to give. But you said the Broncos won't have any target competition, but they still have Brandon Johnson and little Jordan Humphrey. I would not be surprised to see Sean Payton
really miss up an opportunity to twist the Marvin Mims knife there.
Yeah, no. The thing is, those guys are competition for the next guys and for routes. Like they're not target competition, but they like actually legitimately are route competition for Marvin Mims, which is really sad. They're getting on the field, but actually those guys are good probably to have around for Courtland Sutton because they get on the field and then they're not target earners. Like the way that playing 12 is good for the receivers that stay on the field because competing with tight ends for targets is better. Having a team dedicated to giving little Jordan Humphrey and Brandon Johnson routes is great for the one guy who gets to be on the field with them and we like.
Yes. So yeah, I think we can move Hopkins down a little bit.
That's fine.
Yeah. That's probably we don't want to be like super overconfident. And the thing, so Ridley we have down after Sutton in the pure rank. That's why I brought him up because I actually think Sutton's slightly better. But the market we're gonna have to see. If the market may strongly disagree with that, and we'll just bake that in. I have an override on it. I'm gonna take that off actually and see. Let's let the market. No one's gonna freak out probably, right? So we'll just kind of let Ridley kind of come down and see how far he falls.
I will say with Hopkins, in terms of like our confidence on how good he is, 5th in open score, 18th in PFF receiving grade, 18th in yards per route run, which in part factors in how bad his quarterback play was. Like he still looks really good. I think the biggest out to us losing he dominates targets is probably more so that the team is sort of force feeding Ridley targets when we still look at the efficiency and say like, why are they doing this? But it's because they paid him a lot and maybe they think he fits the team better. But I do think in terms of like, if we can surmise talent, I'm fine being pretty confident that Hopkins is more talented. I do agree, though, that like we should also respect the macro lens of we don't really like the Titans. Right.
And that's when you do the stuff like this, you're like, man, sometimes because the misses are inevitable and voluminous. That's just there's a lot of things, right? You're not going to get, you're going to get a lot of things wrong. And the ones where you're like, I didn't even like the Titans. It's like it makes you so mad. So we're still ahead of ADP. So I just bumped Hopkins down a little bit. We're still ahead of ADP, but a little bit more in line with ADP, which I think probably makes more sense. What other signings should we cover here?
I mean, do we even care that Gabe Davis is on the Jags? Like,
yeah, I mean that's probably so. The Jags are interesting because Gabe Davis. This is a bad spot for him, compared to the Bills.
Yeah.
So we're well below market on Gabe Davis. But Zay Jones, this kind of like turned out amazing for Zay Jones, who now we're ahead of market on, which feels a little weird, but I thought he was going to get cut. And I think the Jaguars thought he was going to get cut too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Jags thought they were going to keep Ridley and they were going to have to bid for it. And Zay Jones' contract is very cuttable. And once they signed Gabe Davis, but then said, we're still going after Ridley, at that point, you cannot afford to keep Zay. I think the moment they re-signed Ridley, which they wanted to happen after Wednesday at 4 because it changed the draft comp, the moment that happened, they're like, okay, now we cut Zay Jones. I think you're totally right that was their most likely outcome, probably the most likely outcome as of like Wednesday at 2. And the team's preferred outcome was apparently to sign Gabe and keep Ridley, but he just snuck his way on through all of this, like Matrix dodging all of these bullets. Matrix dodged them adding really strong receiver competition in probably in the form of the draft, which doesn't look likely. And Matrix dodged Ridley coming back, and obviously Matrix dodged getting cut. And now like he just returns to the same situation with, I still think, a meaningfully downgraded receiving core around him going from Ridley to Gabe. I'm not super high on Ridley, but he's better than Gabe. So it will be easier for him to earn targets this year. Zay Jones, that is.
Yeah, I said Gabe was in a bad situation. I mean, he got a clear downgrade.
Clear.
Which, yeah. And it's possible we're too bearish here. The thing is, his ADP has actually risen since signing, which is very strange, but maybe the market priced in that he wasn't going to be a Bill, which was
I think
obvious.
that's fair. I think it was very unlikely he returned to Buffalo. So the market just, it's fair to say like, oh, maybe the market just priced random of 31 teams and a lot of them don't have Trevor Lawrence, which is good. Like Trevor Lawrence is good, even if he's not great. So maybe that's a fair point.
Yeah. I think I definitely know I'm higher than Pat on what Gabe's role could be. I thought that
I'm going to raise him up.
I think he's a fine pick. Again, generally the Ian Hartitz always has the tweets of those receivers and their contracts in free agency. None besides Christian Kirk of like the top 10 have been good signings. So this is a bad forest to be looking for trees in. But if you're on the Jaguars without Ridley, you can squint and see a productive season. It's like 85% of what he did in Buffalo if he's out there every snap.
And, at a far lower price. Yeah, I'm going to get him even with ADP because I think he's fine. If you're stacking up the Jags, you want to see him. So this is probably overly bearish. My reaction was like, man, this is a big downgrade from going to, from being with Josh Allen. Lawrence isn't bad, but it's still a big downgrade. I think probably, although I will say Lawrence does take chances and Gabe Davis doesn't get any separation. So you want a quarterback that's willing to let his guys make plays, which Lawrence is. So probably overly bearish. I'm going to move him up to ADP. He'll be in like right around 131, 132 after the update after this pod. Zay Jones, not too much to say. He's probably a slight value, especially if you're stacking the Jaguars up. Anyone else?
I mean, the Giants signed Isaiah McKenzie, but I don't know if ADP chasing is going to take the whole Giants slot wide receiver conversation.
Yeah, we'll handle that on ADP chasing. Don't worry about that one.
Mooney to Atlanta. Any thoughts?
Mooney,
there?
Yeah, Mooney.
I like that one. Like,
well, we just told me before we updated the ranks because we're not that into Mooney.
I mean,
Mooney's not been.
We should be.
Okay, where do you guys think Mooney should be?
At least draftable. Yeah, that's a good starting
point. Draftable seems fair.
I don't want to completely write off the past 2 years of his career because they're the bad ones and they're the most recent ones, but like it's been a pretty dysfunctional passing game for the past 2 years of his career, and those happen to be the two worst. The last time they had like not Justin Fields, he went for 1,000 yards and was like clearly a high efficiency deep threat, and now he's getting a massive quarterback upgrade. And there's not really any competition for routes.
Fields has played 3 NFL seasons. What are we talking about?
Has he played 3? Oh, he didn't go with Fields. Good for him.
The pre Luke Getsy.
Yeah, I think this is a massive upgrade in quarterback play. Like Fields, not very good.
Yeah,
I don't think it was a well-designed offense.
He's KJ Osborne. Where should he be?
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, that is actually like.
If KJ Osborne was on the Falcons with Kirk and Zach Robinson, that's probably a 17th, 16th, 15th round pick.
Yeah, probably like 15th.
Yeah. I think he's a 17th round pick. Let's see. Yeah, so we're talking like more in the 190s.
I mean, do you know how many receivers on the Falcons pre the Mooney signing they had that had caught an NFL pass?
Well, they also lost Matt Collins, so
yeah, because he was a free agent. Yeah,
I mean he's honestly he's just Zay Jones again.
I was gonna say he's KJ Osborne, except we have him below KJ Osborne, who does not have Kirk Cousins. So to be clear,
all right, apologies, we'll fix that. That's silly.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was that type of guy though, like I think technically right now he's probably the wide receiver 2 on this team. I don't know if that actually sticks, in terms of his role on the routes, but like wide receiver 3 on a team with a quarterback who can make a wide receiver 3 splash.
I would push back a tiny bit on the doesn't stick. I think they're almost certainly going defense at 8 with a defensive head coach and the already significant capital allocated at wideout, tight end, and running back. The other wideouts on the Falcons, stop me when you've heard a name: Chris Blair, Austin Mack, and no one else. This team does not
I
have
think
wide receivers.
Chris Blair played in one of the spring leagues. I think.
I thought you were going to at least say 3 names. The shocking part of that is just the lack of names.
Yeah, Drake London was the only player pre-free agency that had caught a pass in the NFL in the Falcons wide receiver room.
Yeah, I guess there is, like, to your point though, Daniel, they are I think they're a slight favorite to go defense, if not like, minus 150 to go defense, and that doesn't include any other non-pass catcher position. And if they're pushing wide receiver to even like the 3rd or 4th round, it is a deep class, but like that doesn't guarantee that guy plays over Darnell Mooney. Like there's a real chance Darnell Mooney is Kirk Cousins' second receiver, probably not a second pass catcher. Like that guy would, if he makes it through the offseason and they just add like 2 4th-round picks and some like junk free agents, like, late into the free agent process, he probably goes up a lot from where he is now.
Well, let's talk about the Falcons, actually. So obviously the Cousins signing we've touched on, but we haven't talked about those ADPs and how it's going to affect everybody. So Bijan, actually, we may want to consider moving Bijan up. He's flipped Amon-Ra now. He may be coming for Brees, which I get. I mean, Bijan is very good, and, he's going to, I assume, get used like that now on an offense that should be better. I guess what I would note that, Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles. And so like I want to be excited. I'm happy that they finally have quarterback. I'm happy there's going to be quarterback play that's decent for the first time in these guys' entire careers. But there is a point at which I'm going to be like, okay, we have a 35-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear here, guys. Like this isn't like a slam dunk. But I'm still happy to flip Bijan over Amon-Ra, and potentially Brees as well. The guy who I'm actually nervous about is Drake London, who I feel like kind of bad job market on Drake London. Bad job us in that we should have known that the Kirk thing wasn't going to get priced in. It seemed like more likely than not they were going to get Kirk Cousins. I think they were a favorite over the Vikings. Maybe if you factor in all the other potential landing spots, they wouldn't add up to over 50%. But there was a very good chance that they were going to get Kirk Cousins, and we knew that, and we were ahead of Drake London. We were pushing Drake London up on that assumption, but it didn't occur to me that Drake London would immediately vault into the conversation with like DJ Moore, which is what I heard right after the signing. Like, why am I not taking this guy in the early to mid second round? And I think bad job me on that. Like I should have, once you put Kirk Cousins there was, what's the most enthusiastic you could get about Drake London? And it's like, yeah, it is a plausible thing to say you should be taking him, in the early second round. I don't love that, but I get it. Bad job market in that give us a little sign that that's how you felt. You're letting us like get this guy ahead of ADP in like the 3rd, 4th round. Like if that's how you felt, why don't I have none of him? I've got like 20% of them pre-signing. Like that's crazy. If that's how you guys felt, like you should have maybe like factored in the news that Kirk Cousins was likely to sign there. So I feel like we both have some lessons that we can learn from this. Where are you guys taking Drake London now?
2-3 turn feels right. Don't want to be significantly underweight on him given the upside, but if he gets to the early second, I might have to start passing.
I don't think I'm in there.
Yep, I agree with that. I think we have him in a really good spot. Like, I think you could argue him over Tank Dell, and I don't think you could argue. I wouldn't argue him anyone above that. Like, if I wanted to flip him one spot up, that's where I'd get to. But like, Diggs is playing with Josh Allen this year. I don't know what the future looks like for Diggs, but I don't see it's extremely unlikely that he isn't playing with Josh Allen this year. I'm not taking Drake London over that. Like, not happening. So, maybe we move him up a little bit as the market continues to rise on him, but I wouldn't consider taking him in the early second. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could, you could take him over Tank Dell which we have Tank Dell one spot ahead of him. I think we could flip him there, and the
That'd be
market's
fun,
gonna. Yeah, I think the market goes that
And we're
way.
ahead of ADP right now. Maybe we don't have to make that flip at all.
I think we do.
I think we will at some point, but
I think we do. London has risen from 38 to 30 over the last week, so it's been a big rise so far, and I think it continues. I think he settles at the 2-3 turn, maybe a little ahead of that. I guess I think we can settle at the 2-3 turn and get some Drake London is maybe a better way to put it. His ADP might be slightly ahead of that.
sure.
But without having a fade stance on Drake London, we could probably just have him at the 2-3 turn, which I like. Kyle Pitts is up a bunch as well. We are still ahead of ADP, but that ADP is going to continue to rise. We have him at 68. What?
We learned no lessons.
I gave a hearty salute to you.
Oh,
You're still ahead of ADP.
Yeah, I know.
You better
I know.
believe we are, buddy.
Our Kyle had a great tweet last year saying something about if you thought we were getting a discount on Kyle Pitts in 2023, you can't wait to see where we're going to get to draft him in 2024. We're drafting him earlier, actually. So,
Yeah, it's so sick.
But I read like
he's up 11 spots here in ADP, so they're coming. Yeah,
I read half of the Martingale approach. I guess I didn't really learn that you're supposed to wait for it to get cheaper to keep buying. We're just like, no, I'll buy at more expensive prices. Why not?
Look, if we know it's going up in the long run, the price now doesn't matter. To be clear.
Yeah. So kind of classic, but I actually think we end up behind on Kyle Pitts.
I doubt that.
I don't think we get behind. We're 9 spots ahead ADP right now. I think we get closer. Obviously, this isn't the last spot he's going to get to, but like, not everyone thinks Kyle Pitts is good. A lot of people don't think he's good. So for him to rise another 3/4 of a round, I don't think so. You could be right. That wouldn't shock me.
I think he ends up in the. I think he's right behind Dalton Kincaid. I think that's where he lands, and we'll have a few spots. Just having him not right behind. That's my prediction. We'll see.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone saw Kirk Cousins' intro press comments about if he could get to where 8. And perfect. Kirk said, Kyle Pitts was really excited to give it to me. I said, no, I need to donate, to your charity or something. He said, no, just give me targets. So,
wow.
Yeah, he literally said, he's like, and then Kirk's like, he was kind of joking. And then everyone on Twitter's like, he wasn't joking, dude.
Evan Ingram, we should have talked about. And I think you could make a pretty compelling case that Pitts should be behind Ingram.
Yeah, you could.
But I guess
I ain't doing it. But like Ingram was 2 catches, or maybe it's 3, whatever. He was a few catches away from setting the tight end receptions record last year. And the only thing that's changed is that Calvin Ridley, who was solid, is now Gabe Davis, who I think is a less valuable target earner. Like, he's pushing for the record this year again, probably.
Yeah, Ingram's week 1 reception prop is going to be 5.5 or 6.5. Kyle Pitts is probably 3.5. So
don't give us 4.5.
Yeah, I think I want to take both. I think there's a pretty good range for tight end, especially in this environment where tight end dries up. You really kind of need to have one tight end, I think, through like the Njoku range, through the Ferguson range, maybe. Well, no, Njoku's falling behind. So yeah, the Njoku range. So, Goddard and Schultz are like guys that might be your tight end 1 in the big or in Best Ball Mania. But right now, I love for Schultz to be my tight end 2, and I'm done. It's just tough. And obviously you can piece it together. I do that too, but I like being higher on these tight ends in this range. We're actually higher on Ingram than Bowers by 1 pick in the pure ranks, but the ADP has Ingram behind for now. I think he flips him soon. Kyle Pitts, though, if the market was like, I prefer Ingram to Pitts very strongly, fine. I don't have an issue. Right now, the market does prefer Pitts, and so we do as well. But that's, yeah. Are you guys, do you want to lower Pitts? Are you getting a little nervous already?
Do I want to lower Pitts? No.
Okay.
We're not lowering him now. I've had to lower him for the past 3 years of my life.
No, I like that we're in character.
All right, okay.
Feels good to be 6th round Kyle Pitts. And
I gave you the chance.
Speaking of the Falcons receivers, I need to issue a quick stat correction. I said that they had 2 receivers on the roster besides Mooney and London, none of which had caught a pass. They actually have a third receiver who has also never caught an NFL pass, Josh Ali. So 3 other receivers collectively, 1 target, 0 receptions.
Josh Ali,
he's on my Madden franchise mode. We drafted him in 2029. So,
all right. Well,
Pat, to your point though, I wouldn't, if Kyle Pitts does get ADP wise right next to Dalton Kincaid, I wouldn't mind. I won't have a problem being behind ADP if he starts to get to that point. Like, he's not a player who, as the market rises, I'm thinking like, oh, we got to keep rising with him because there won't really be new information. He'd be a player I'd accept us being below ADP on if it gets to that point.
Yeah, like with Pitts, I think this is about as high as we'll go, but I think the market gets here, and so it's sort of just trying to get. It's a kind of a crazy. We didn't do these best ball rankings for last year's big board, and it is wild. Like trying to anticipate. I think the market's coming here, and we should just get there on this guy, and then like actually maybe we shouldn't fade this guy so hard. Let's just like bake in the ADP or when to kind of override guys and let the true rank shine through. It's all been really fun and kind of interesting. One thing is the Diontae Johnson trade. We didn't talk about that.
Oh yeah.
Johnson, I guess, did he get a downgrade? I don't even know. Is this a downgrade?
Probably technically, but like honestly, I think the fact that we have more data on Pickett saying he's not good, like I'm pretty out on him. I guess they have Russ at this point, but like I think that quarterback situation is going to be pretty bad. Like, do you think Russ is starting all 17 games?
No, but I think he's the favorite to start like 10 plus. I think he wins it week 1. Maybe he gets benched, but he's the better quarterback in that room.
Yeah, and he's the better quarterback versus Bryce Young too, despite the fall off we've had. But like the upside, I think has to be
that
higher.
I don't know about.
No,
that I don't know about. He's better. Last year's version of Russ and last year's version of Bryce Young, no question. Russ was better.
Yeah.
But Dave Canales Young versus Gerald or Russ.
I still think the most likely outcome, given how bad Bryce was last year, and that we're sure Russ is like a top 32 caliber quarterback, is that Russ is better. But there's no scenario in which the Steelers offense pops off. Not happening. Passing any-wise. I don't have to say passing-wise. In any scenario. It's not breaking out. It's not going to be a breakout offense. Maybe they surprise us with a little bit of efficiency, like Desmond Ridder gave us some good weeks last year. But I'm totally on board. Like, the Falcons are a really strong team to improve. They almost can't get worse, but they could be a team that could meaningfully improve. They've done a lot. They're spending like $150 million over the next 5 years on just 2 guards alone. Obviously an upgrade receiver and a massive upgrade at head coach. Like, they're a team that could really push to be like even just average at passing, which I don't think the Steelers will get to. So I think this is, as much as like Bryce Young was terrible last year, I think we want to pinpoint spots where there could be a big win. And the Steelers were not ever going to be a big win. Maybe they surprise us a little bit, but the Panthers could be a big win. And now he's on that team.
Yeah, this feels like the year 2 Jets. I mean, Garrett Wilson was going somehow in the 9th or 10th round because of how horrific Zach Wilson was year 1. And obviously there's a bit more uncertainty with how good Garrett was. Turns out he was awesome year 1 and paid off in one of the worst environments of the past few years. But Diontae, I think, is somewhat similar, though lower likelihood of the high-end outcome. But I like it. I probably want
I mean, he's somewhat similar in that he can earn targets at a very high rate, but he also isn't very good overall. Like,
he's empty
holistically,
calories.
He's not that great. He's empty calories, yeah.
He's empty calories in an offense that almost made Adam Thielen a top 12 wide receiver.
Right. Although
Probably
it's not technically that offense. It's that it's that quarterback. But
yeah,
I would say, so one of the things I was in Discord, I was chatting about this. It's like Deontay's interesting because he's like kind of like he's sort of a safety blanket, but to a detriment for a quarterback, where he, like, the knowledge that you can throw to Diontae Johnson right now is like probably bad.
I think we've kind of made this point with Evan Ingram. At least I have. We're like, did we really need to get Evan Ingram the receptions record? Was that the best strategy for your offense, given his, like, I think it's literally like a 4 or 5 ADOT. Like, as far as we say, like, oh, passing so much more efficient than running. I don't know, man. Like when you're doing it this way, you are really limiting your upside. I do think, though, the fact that Deontay has played with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, he probably caught a pass from Devlin Hodges at one point, and Ben Roethlisberger, I'd imagine. Like he got a murderer's row of guys who are just going to check it down and we're going to give you no explosive plays. If Bryce Young improves, he could be more than that. And we also saw Deontay Johnson's ADOT.
That's what he was last year, though.
Well,
you know, he's just peppering Thielen with underneath stuff.
No, I know. Like he just has to be like a better quarterback. But we also saw Deontay's ADOT. I think it crossed like 12 last year. Like he finally wasn't quite the like check down stuff. And
that's
probably
true.
Just,
yeah, that's
like,
true.
I think he can be more than that. It's possible, at least. I think it's within the range of outcomes that he's not like, did we really need to get Deontay 10 catches in this game? Where like there were games in Pittsburgh where I'm like, oh, great. The 10 for 68 or whatever. Is that really that efficient? And it's not. I think he can be more than that. I don't know that he is, but I think it's certainly within the range of outcomes, given that we saw his ADOT go up last year, and we know all of his quarterbacks have been bums for his entire career. So,
yeah,
the market seems to be reacting positively. He's up to pick 90. He was at 98 a week ago. So I don't know. I guess I'm not as into it as the market, but we're
neither.
Even with ADP right now. But if this rise continues, it's gonna be tough to stick with.
This is like we just like Jesus. I guess maybe this is an upgrade, is how we feel. But like I know 8 picks at just above one or just below 100 isn't a ton, but still like 8 picks is a notable market saying like, oh, this is a bit of an improvement. I think maybe arguably it's an improvement, but like I'm not confident in that at all.
Yeah. I know Kyle has a hard out, but there was a recent trade. The Cardinals got a new quarterback. Do you want to guess who it is? A new backup?
Hold on.
Don't say Justin Fields.
Oh, wait,
it's not
really?
Justin Fields.
Oh, okay.
We've been potting long enough that it could have been.
Trying to think of like who's on this coaching staff that I don't know.
We just talked about him. The Atlanta Falcons have sent Desmond Ridder for Rondale Moore. So the Falcons add a receiver that has caught an NFL pass, and the Cardinals had a decent backup, I guess.
All right.
Maybe. Sure. Whatever.
So, we'll probably lower Mooney a bit, just if the stance was there are 0 receivers that have caught passes. Now there's one more.
I think
now there's one.
I think this is good for Mooney. Maybe this is like a slight blocker in the way that we talk about teams adding like
they don't draft
just
someone.
Good enough running back to stop them from drafting a good running back.
Different roles in the offense as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to cost him routes, but maybe it prevents them from taking a receiver. Maybe, it's not. Not that big of.
Let's talk Pickens real quick before because I have a hard out as well.
Sure.
Pickens were slightly behind on ADP, but we have bumped up. It's just going to be such low volume, so it's like hard for me to be like want to be really invested in Pickens. Although I was drafting Drake London last year, and London was significantly more expensive than this. So I don't want to be out on Pickens either, but we're slightly behind. We can kind of close with this.
Well, Drake
slightly behind is fine. I don't think Pickens is the target earner that London probably is, but man, the competition is weak. It's somehow weaker than London's was last year, which was not good. So, and he probably fits with the run, pass, chuck it up and see how that goes type of environment. I think we'll see. So yeah, I think slightly behind, but not, far from undraftable makes sense for Pickens.
Yeah, and London also was going with a now Arizona Cardinal Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke quarterback room. So I don't think that the Steelers quarterback room is meaningfully different in ranges of outcomes. And Pickens is cheaper, less good. Makes sense. Don't want to be too far from ADP.
All right. Thank you, guys. This has been a lot of fun. Look for an update to these rankings that reflect the changes that you saw on the site at legendaryupside.com. Draft right off from on Underdog. They have ADP baked in, so I think they're pretty fun to just load in there and draft off. That's what I've been doing the whole big board. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching.